I never thought I'd live to experience this moment again, the blinding hospital lights above my head, the screams rattling from my throat, and the overwhelming pain tearing through my body like knives. But here I was, in 1986. Again. The day I nearly died giving birth. The day my husband Daniel Carter let me and our newborn son burn because he missed his childhood sweetheart's birthday, Vanessa Collins, and blamed me for her death. Last time, I made the mistake of asking my cousin Mia to go get him. He had stayed by my side during labor, missing Vanessa's birthday, and in her grief, she took a walk, slipped into a pond, and drowned. At the full moon celebration for our son, Daniel set our house on fire with us trapped inside and said, "Claire Bennett, it's just giving birth to a child. If it weren't for your dramatics, Vanessa wouldn't have died. You should all be buried with her." I remember every word, every scream, every betrayal. But not this time. This time, I told Mia not to go. Daniel could stay exactly where he wanted with Vanessa. I'd get through this without him. I thought I'd made the right decision until a stabbing pain hit me so hard I thought my spine would snap. The doctors weren't here to help. One in particular, Dr. Linda Moore, looked at me like I was an inconvenience. "Push harder. You think babies just fall out of the sky," she snapped. The baby wasn't moving. Panic flooded me. Mia, who was waiting outside the room, was trembling with worry. She made a move toward the hallway, probably to find help, but the nurse grabbed her wrist and said coldly, "Today is Miss Collins's birthday. Captain Carter is with her. You're not allowed to disturb him. Besides, it's just childbirth. Madam Carter should be considerate of her husband's duties." I wanted to scream, not from pain, but from fury. They were going to let me die. Just like before. The flood of memories came crashing down, and I realized I really was reborn. This was the same day, the same scene, the same setup. Except now I knew how it ended. In my previous life, I'd begged Mia to go get Daniel, and that one decision got us all killed. But today, I wasn't begging. I was commanding. I clenched my teeth and shouted through the door, "Mia, go find Mom. Tell her to call Dr. Evelyn Ross immediately." As soon as I said it, Dr. Moore's eyes flashed with panic. She lunged toward me, slammed my shoulders down, and shouted to the nurses, "Don't let the girl leave. Why call another doctor? Madam Carter, don't you trust me? You women exaggerate pain. Stay still." Mia tried to run, but two armed men appeared and pinned her to the floor like we were in a war zone, not a delivery room. I didn't remember this in my previous life. Daniel must have planted extra guards this time to ensure I'd be silenced. My legs were forced open. Dr. Moore yanked at the baby with no care. Blood poured out of me, and the pain was beyond human comprehension. I cried, screamed, pleaded, but she smirked. "Save your energy. Commander Bennett may be your father, but he gave clear orders. You are not to disturb Captain Carter today." My heart sank. Daniel was reborn too. He knew I'd be dying again, and he still chose Vanessa. Again. I was shaking, my vision blurry, but I knew I had to keep fighting. Outside the door, I heard footsteps. A voice stirred in my head. Colonel Mitchell's daughter-in-law was also in the hospital today. Maybe I screamed, "Help. Please help me." Dr. Moore's face turned gray. She rushed to cover my mouth. "You're not giving up yet?" I bit her hand so hard I felt blood. "Colonel Mitchell, please save me." That was all I got out before a nurse slammed a wet towel over my face. I was suffocating, but even as I choked, I saw Mia panic and try to run again. "Save my sister. Save her," she shouted. But she didn't get far. Two men tackled her and dragged her away like she was nothing. "Get this idiot locked in a room and don't let her out," one of them ordered. My strength was draining fast. Blood soaked the bed, and the baby still wasn't moving. I felt like I was drowning. Dr. Moore picked up a scalpel and hissed, "Why won't this trouble end? Push harder, you useless thing." Then she turned to a nurse and said, "We've got Miss Collins's birthday party to attend. Let's wrap this up." Just when I was sure I wouldn't make it, a voice rang out like a lightning bolt. Why are you here, Miss Morgan? It was Rachel Morgan, my best friend, my lifesaver, the only one who remembered my due date. I couldn't speak. I couldn't even lift my arms. The doctor panicked and ordered the nurses. Hold her down. Get the baby back in. I'll deal with Miss Morgan. One nurse hesitated, but if Miss Morgan sees, shut up and do it. The doctor snapped. She left to confront Rachel, and I was left with two nurses trying to shove the baby back inside me. The pain was unbearable. I started hitting the bed with my elbows, hoping Rachel would hear me. I heard her argue outside. It's been hours. She's still in labor? What kind of hospital is this? I'm calling DR. Ross now. You have 1 hour to deliver that baby, or I'm calling my father. The doctor came back smug, but even the nurse looked at her, terrified. What if Rachel Morgan finds out? She whispered. Then we'll be done for. DR. Moore's eyes narrowed. Then let's make sure no one talks. If the mother dies during childbirth, well, that happens all the time. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My heart dropped. They were planning to kill me. I couldn't move my arms, so I kicked the metal table with all the strength I had left. DR. Moore signaled to the nurse, and she clamped her hand over my mouth again. But this time, something changed. I heard Rachel's voice again. What's that noise? Where's Captain Carter? Claire's giving birth today, why isn't he here? The doctor froze. No need to call him Miss Morgan, she said, stumbling over her words. Rachel wasn't buying it. Call his unit. Now. I want him here in 10 minutes. I wanted to cry. No, I didn't want Daniel here. I just wanted her. I wanted her to save me. But my struggle was too weak. Minutes later, Officer Reed returned. Captain Carter says he's with Miss Collins. He's too busy to come, but he sent guards to monitor the situation. Rachel exploded. He said what? The doctor looked smug again. Miss Morgan, Captain Carter insists this isn't a place for you. Rachel's fists clenched, but she had no choice. They were using her job against her. She left, but reluctantly. That's when I realized this was bigger than me. They were silencing everyone. I tried one last time, bit the nurse's hand hard, kicked wildly, screamed with what little breath I had left. One of the guards started asking questions. What's going on in there? This hospital is supposed to be soundproof. Why is it so loud? The doctor tried to dismiss him, but just then, boom, the door slammed open. Rachel was back. Get out of my way. She saw me. Blood everywhere. My wrists tied. The nurses frozen in fear. Her eyes burned with rage. As my last bit of consciousness faded, I reached a shaking hand toward her. Please call DR. Ross. And don't tell Daniel. Then I passed out. When I opened my eyes again, the room was dim, and the pain in my body had dulled to a low throb, but I was alive. That realization alone made my throat tighten. The last time I went through this, I didn't get to wake up. I burned alive holding my son while the man I called my husband lit the fire. But this time I was here, and in my arms, breathing softly, was my baby boy. My heart clenched as I looked down at him. He had tiny hands, a round little face, and long lashes like his father, but I forced myself not to think about that. Beside me, Mia was sitting with bruises on her cheeks and tears in her eyes. Claire, you're okay, the baby's okay. I'm okay too. Everything's okay now. She sniffled and tried to smile, but it cracked halfway through, and I saw the fear still lingering in her expression. She had tried to fight for Mimi's sweet, loyal cousin with her scattered thoughts and simple heart, and they had thrown her down and dragged her away like she was nothing. Before I could even say a word, the door flung open. Two shadows stepped inside. Mia bolted upright, trying to wipe her face quickly as she greeted them, but Daniel didn't even glance at her. He stormed to my bedside, ripped the blanket off my legs, and snapped, Claire Bennett, have you caused enough trouble yet? I blinked at him, stunned. He looked furious, not a hint of guilt in his expression. You were just having a baby. DR. Moore has always been professional and loyal. And now, because of your drama, she's being investigated and suspended. What exactly do you think you've accomplished? And standing behind him, like a fragile porcelain doll with teary eyes and trembling hands, was Vanessa Collins. She reached for his sleeve and tugged gently, her voice pitiful. Don't be angry. Daniel, this is all my fault. If Claire hadn't tried to protect me, none of this would have happened, Dr. Moore was just trying to help me too, you know? She's like family to me. She watched me grow up. If she really loses her license, I don't think I'll want to live anymore. Daniel immediately softened, turning to hug her protectively. Don't worry, I won't let them touch her. I'll make this right. He turned his cold gaze back to me, like I was some monster for not dropping dead. My stitches were burning, my body still raw, but none of it compared to the aching in my chest. I had spent years loving him. I thought I knew him. I helped him rise through the military ranks with my father's backing, supported him when others mocked his low background, even welcomed Vanessa into my house when he said she needed care. And now, after everything, he looked at me like I was a villain. Mia stood up, her voice shaking. Brother-in-law Claire was bleeding, Dr. Moore didn't let me get help. She's bad. She hurt my sister. Did I ask you to speak? Daniel roared and slapped her across the face. Mia crumpled back onto the stool, crying silently. He glared at me again. You'd better stop pushing this. I swear I'll protect Dr. Moore. You think you're doing something noble? You're pathetic. Today's Vanessa's birthday. I'm giving you 1 day. Tell those investigators to back off, or I'll make sure you regret it. He stormed out with Vanessa, who turned to look at me before leaving and flashed me a smug, barely concealed smile. I didn't react. I didn't need to. My silence was louder than her smugness. That evening, Rachel returned with chicken soup, her expression unreadable as she sat on the edge of my bed. Claire, she said carefully, if you don't divorce him now, are you planning to keep this nightmare going into the next year? Into the rest of your life? I looked down, unable to answer. She sighed and handed me the soup, and we didn't speak again. But I knew she was right. Daniel didn't come back that night. The next morning, someone from my parents' staff dropped off supplies, but they didn't stay long. I knew my father had heard. I also knew he was watching how I'd respond. That afternoon, Vanessa showed up again, walking into my hospital room like she owned the place, her voice syrupy sweet as she called out, Sister-in-law, I didn't want to disturb you while you're still weak, but I thought you'd like an update. Brother Daniel's exhausted from hosting my birthday party last night, so he's sleeping over at my place to rest. She didn't even pretend to hide the dig. He told me not to come, but I thought you'd worry if you didn't hear from him, so here I am. My baby stirred in my arms, woken by her voice, and I gently rocked him, not even glancing at her. But Vanessa wasn't done. By the way, I know you're upset that Daniel came to my party instead of being here for the birth. But really, don't take it out on Dr. Moore. Without her, would you and the baby even be alive? My lips curled into a cold smile. I got up slowly, cradled my baby in one arm, and walked to the door to face her. If you're so worried about Dr. Moore, I said softly, maybe you should go visit her at the police station. She's being charged with attempted murder of a pregnant woman. There are multiple witnesses, nurses, staff ready to testify. Vanessa's face went pale. You'd really send her to jail? Not just jail, I whispered, my voice still gentle. If I use my father's connections, the sentence could be death. Intentional assault with lethal intent against a high-ranking officer's daughter during labor? That's not something that gets swept under the rug. Before I could finish, she turned and ran out of the room screaming. I went back to my baby, whose soft whimpers had turned into cries. I hummed to him, trying to soothe him, trying to stay calm, even though my heart was pounding. 10 minutes later, the door slammed open so hard it rattled the walls. Claire Bennett. Daniel's voice thundered, filled with rage. Have you lost your mind? Vanessa trailed behind him, sobbing hysterically. Brother Daniel, I didn't mean for any of this. I just thought it wasn't right for you to be there during childbirth. I was trying to help. I never wanted anyone to get hurt. She dropped to her knees, reaching toward me, fake tears running down her cheeks. Please, I'm begging you. Dr. Moore's like family to me. If she's convicted, Her life is over. Please, Claire. I'll do anything. Daniel yanked her back up and turned to me. You're going too far. Using power to bully people doesn't make you strong. You're disgusting. I held my son protectively, turning away from him. That's when he lost it. He slapped me across the face and screamed, I didn't show up for a delivery, and now you're trying to ruin lives over it? You're insane. He grabbed our newborn son and threw him roughly onto the bed. My heart stopped. Mia rushed forward, crying, Brother-in-law, stop. Dr. More hurt Claire. She's bad. But Vanessa cut her off, crying louder. I know Claire never liked me. But to think I wanted her dead? That's a lie. Dr. Moore is my best friend. Do you think I'd order her to kill Claire? Why would I ever? Daniel turned and kicked Mia, sending her tumbling to the floor. I tried to reach for my son, but my body was still weak, my stitches barely healed. He grabbed my hair, dragged me out of the bed, and shouted, You're going to the police station right now. You'll tell them you were wrong, that you misunderstood everything, that you just wanted someone to blame. I screamed, struggled, begged, but he didn't care. Blood seeped from my reopened wound as he shoved me into the car. Just as the driver started the engine, another black military vehicle pulled in front of us. The window rolled down, and Rachel's icy voice cut through the air like a knife. I've already turned Dr. Moore in to the police. If you've got a problem, Daniel Carter, you can take it up with me. The moment Rachel's voice sliced through the thick tension in the car, Daniel froze, his hand still clenching the back of my neck like he owned me, like he had the right to control where I went and what I said. But Rachel Morgan was not someone you ignored, not even if you were Captain Daniel Carter. Her family's influence in Washington was as legendary as my father's military command, and she didn't need to shout to be terrifying her calm. Cutting words were enough to stop anyone in their tracks. Daniel released me instantly, his expression darkening as he turned his face toward the window, his jaw clenched so tightly I thought it might crack, and for once, I didn't feel weak, I felt protected. Rachel stepped out of her vehicle like she had walked out of a political thriller, heels clicking against the pavement, her tailored coat catching the breeze, and behind her were two MPs who stood at attention, waiting for her orders. She didn't even look at Daniel at first. She came straight to me, opened the car door, and helped me out like I was the only person that mattered. You're bleeding, she said quietly, her voice laced with barely controlled rage. He reopened your incision, didn't he? I nodded once, trembling. Get her to my estate immediately. She snapped at the MPs, and they moved faster than I could think, helping me into her car while Rachel turned to Daniel, finally locking eyes with him. Captain Carter, if you touch her again, even one more time, I'll make sure your name is wiped off every promotion list from here to the Arctic. Vanessa, who had been standing behind him this whole time, tried to intervene with a pitiful, Miss Morgan, please, it's not what it looks like, but Rachel shut her down with a single glance. Don't speak. You've done enough. We drove off, and I barely remembered the ride. Everything hurt me, body, my heart, my pride, but Rachel's presence beside me was like an anchor. She held my hand the whole time and didn't say anything until we were inside her house, in the safety of her private guest room, where her family's doctor was already waiting. He treated my wound, stopped the bleeding, and gave me something to ease the pain. Then Rachel handed me a cup of warm ginger tea and looked at me with that gaze that always saw straight through people. Claire, she said calmly, Vanessa Collins has been kneeling outside my gates for 6 hours. She's asking to see you. What do you want to do? My grip on the cup tightened, the tea suddenly too hot in my hands. I nodded slowly, and Rachel motioned to her assistant. A moment later, Vanessa was brought inside. She looked like a wilted rose, messy hair, red eyes, fake innocence turned to visible desperation, but the second she saw me sitting upright, alert, not broken like she expected, her expression shifted. Claire, she said hesitantly, please, I know I've made mistakes, but you can't possibly think I wanted to hurt you. That doctor, Dr. Moore, she misunderstood my words. I would never. Enough. I cut her off. You don't need to explain. I already know. Her face twitched. You know what? That it was you who told her to do it. I said coldly. I have her signed confession, and the nurses backed it up.
Dr.
Moore admitted you pressured her into silencing me. Vanessa's breath caught. Her fake tears came immediately. Claire, you don't understand. I was scared. I thought if Daniel stayed with you while you were giving birth, he'd resent me forever, so you decided to have me killed. I stood up slowly, every inch of movement sending bolts of pain through my abdomen, but I needed her to see me like this, standing, alive, and no longer under her thumb. Rachel, I said without turning, can you give me the room? Rachel smiled grimly, nodded, and walked out, but not before locking the door from the outside. I turned back to Vanessa and stepped closer. Do you remember what it felt like, Vanessa? I whispered. When Dr. Moore shoved the baby back into my body while I screamed for my life. When your guards tied down my cousin and tried to choke me with a towel. When Daniel left me to die again? Vanessa backed away, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. Claire, I didn't mean it, pleased and hurt me. But she wasn't talking to me anymore. She was talking to the woman she remembered from the past, the pushover, the obedient military wife, the girl who forgave everything. That woman was dead. I slapped her across the face with the strength I had left, and then another, and another, until she was sobbing and crumpled on the floor. You think I'll stop just because you cry? I spat. You killed me once already. You tried to do it again. But this time, I'm the one holding the knife. She wailed, begging for forgiveness, and I barely heard it over the blood rushing in my ears. When I opened the door, Rachel was waiting calmly outside with a glass of wine in one hand. She glanced at Vanessa bleeding on the floor and raised an eyebrow. Took you long enough. I laughed for the first time in days, my body still aching but my heart lighter than it had been since my son was born. She got what she deserved. Rachel nodded, then turned as the front gate buzzed with a new arrival. Looks like Captain Carter finally worked up the nerve to come here. Should we let him in? I asked. No, Rachel said smoothly. Let's make him beg for it. But of course, he didn't beg. He stormed in like he owned the place the second her guards stepped aside, wearing his uniform like it was still supposed to impress someone, his expression dark as thunder until his eyes landed on Vanessa, bloodied, bruised, pathetic. What did you do to her? He roared. Open this door now.
Claire.
Rachel. You can't do this. This is illegal. Rachel simply sipped her wine and smiled. Go ahead. Call the police. Let them know how your mistress and your personal doctor tried to murder your wife while she was in labor. That's slander, he barked, but his voice was weaker now. I walked slowly down the stairs, ignoring the sharp pain radiating through my side. No, Daniel, it's called attempted homicide. And guess what? You're not the hero this time. You're the accomplice. He paled. Claire, don't do this. You're angry, I get it. But this is too far. Oh, now you're worried about what's too far? I raised my hand, and Rachel's guard stepped in again, escorting him out before he could say another word. The door slammed shut behind him, but not before Vanessa screamed. Daniel, save me. I turned back to Rachel. What now? She shrugged. We keep her here until the charges stick. Then we let her rot. And Daniel? I asked. Let him squirm, she said simply. Let him feel powerless. It's about time. Later that night, as I held my son close and watched him sleep, I thought back to the full moon banquet in my previous life, how Daniel held this same child with fake pride before setting our world on fire, how his calm facade masked the monster inside. This time, I would rewrite everything. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the storm, and the reckoning had just begun. I thought the hard part was over once Vanessa got what she deserved, but the truth is, surviving the betrayal is only the beginning. Rebuilding yourself from the ashes is where the real war starts, and mine wasn't done yet. After Rachel kicked Daniel out of her estate, and I made Vanessa eat the consequences of her schemes, things moved fast. Rachel handed everything over to her legal team, who were absolute sharks.
Dr.
Moore had already confessed under pressure, her voice trembling on the recording as she admitted that Vanessa told her to do whatever it takes to keep Claire quiet that day in the delivery room. Every nurse who had witnessed what happened, how they tried to suffocate me, restrain me, silence my cousin's signed statements. I didn't have to lift a finger to build the case. The truth built itself like a tidal wave coming for the two people who thought I'd never fight back. And for once, I didn't feel scared, I felt seen. I felt like justice was finally tilting in my favor. When I returned home to my family estate with my son in my arms, I thought maybe, just maybe, Daniel would finally give up. But of course, he didn't. 2 days after Vanessa was arrested and charged, Daniel showed up at the gates of the Bennett estate like a man possessed. He didn't look like the perfect military poster boy anymore. His uniform was wrinkled, his hair unkempt, and his eyes empty. "Claire," he shouted as I stood at the top of the front steps, "this has gone far enough. She's already behind bars. What more do you want?" "The truth," I said coldly. "I want the truth out. Every detail, every lie you tried to cover, every hand you lent to her plans. You knew what she did, and you let it happen. You let her almost kill me. You let her nearly murder your own son." "You think I knew?" he snapped. "You think I wanted that?" "I didn't know what she planned," she said. "She just wanted to keep me from being distracted." "Don't you dare." I cut in, stepping forward with all the fury I'd held back for years. "You knew I was in labor. You knew she didn't want you leaving her birthday party. And you chose her. You always chose her. So don't stand there acting like this wasn't your fault." His lips parted, but he had no words. Just as I was about to turn and walk away, he lunged forward. "Claire, please," he said, voice trembling. "I don't have anyone left. Vanessa's in jail. My team's been reassigned. I'm under investigation. Just please, I need you." I stared at him, this man who once had every corner of my heart, who once looked like a dream in uniform, now crumbling before me like a tower built on lies. "You need me?" I whispered. "You needed me when I was dying in that hospital. You needed me when your mistress lit our world on fire in the last life. But you weren't there either time, Daniel. And now that your empire is collapsing, suddenly I'm worth begging for." He fell to his knees like the weight of it all finally broke him. "I made mistakes," he choked out. "I was wrong. I see that now. I'll do anything, just let me make it up to you. Let me be a father to our son." "You mean the same son you threw onto the bed like a rag doll? The one you let burn in the last life?" I whispered, my hands trembling as I clutched the child close to my chest. "Don't pretend to be a father now. You lost that right the moment you chose her life over ours." His expression twisted into something unrecognizable. Shame, hate, regret, it was all there, clashing behind his eyes. He looked like he wanted to scream, like he wanted to blame me but couldn't. That's when Rachel stepped out onto the porch beside me, arms crossed, eyes cold as steel. "Captain Carter," she said mockingly, "perhaps you should go before you humiliate yourself further. If not for Claire, at least for what's left of your career." He didn't respond. He just stood up slowly, wiping his hands against his pants like they were stained, then turned away and walked down the driveway, shoulders hunched, soul shattered. I knew then that whatever hope he had left of crawling back into my life had just burned out completely. But even with him gone, the fallout wasn't over. A week later, the military compound held an inquiry. As the daughter of General Robert Bennett, I was asked to appear and explain why I had publicly accused a decorated captain of complicity in attempted murder. I didn't hesitate. I walked into that hall filled with generals, officers, commanders, most of whom had sided with Daniel for years, and I knelt. I knelt with my head high, spine straight, holding a folder of evidence in one hand and my son in the other. "I will not apologize," I said loud and clear, because everything I said was true. Vanessa Collins and Dr. Linda Moore tried to kill me. They would have succeeded if Rachel Morgan hadn't intervened. And Captain Daniel Carter? He let it happen. He chose not to come when he knew I was in critical condition. He assigned guards to prevent anyone from reaching him. He watched from the shadows and pretended he didn't know. Gasps rippled through the room. Daniel stood up from his seat, eyes wide with disbelief. "You're lying," he shouted. "Claire, you know that's not how it happened." "Oh, really?" I replied calmly. Then explain this. I handed the panel the written confession, the voice recordings, and a series of photos showing the bruises on my wrists, arms, and face. The same photos Rachel's team had taken just hours after I was rescued. One of the nurses had even included a handwritten statement describing in detail how they were instructed to keep me quiet no matter the cost. The silence in the room was deafening. Daniel's face drained of color as he realized he was alone. Not one officer stepped up to defend him. Not one person came to his aid. Even his own superior glanced away, ashamed. My father stood at the end of the hall, his expression unreadable, but his hands were clenched into fists. When the hearing ended, I walked out into the sunlight with my baby sleeping soundly in my arms and Rachel beside me. "It's done," she said quietly. "He's finished." "Not yet," I replied. "There's still one thing left, the divorce." I filed that same day. And just like I expected, Daniel tried to stop it. He sent letters. He showed up at my gate. He begged my father. But I didn't waver. I ignored every word, burned every note, slammed every door. He had his chance.
He threw it away.
3 weeks later, news broke that Vanessa had committed suicide in custody. They said she left no note, but I didn't believe that. Vanessa Collins never did anything without a message, even if it was silent. When I went to see Daniel one last time, he was a shell of himself. He hadn't shaved in weeks, his uniform looked too big on him, and his hands trembled as he opened the door. "Claire," he said, eyes red. "You came?" "I came," I said softly, holding a small black urn in both hands. "And I brought her with me." His gaze dropped to the urn, and his legs buckled. He fell to his knees again, just like before, except this time there were no cameras, no audience, no sympathy. Just the man who once let me die, now facing the consequences of losing everything. "Do you remember now?" I asked. "Do you remember how you threw your own son into the fire in your last life? How you dragged me through the flames and forced me to bow at Vanessa's altar while my skin melted off?" His mouth opened, but no words came. "This time, I got justice," I whispered. "And I hope it haunts you." Then I turned around and walked away, never looking back. 3 months later, Rachel called me with a simple sentence. "He's dead. Car accident. Or suicide. No one's sure. Either way, it's over." And it was. Finally. Over. After Rachel told me Daniel was dead, I didn't say a word for a long time. I just sat on the patio, watching the golden afternoon light spill across the garden, my son sleeping in my arms, his tiny chest rising and falling like the world hadn't just buried one of its monsters. I didn't cry, not because I was strong, but because I had already cried all my tears a long time ago, on the night he set our home on fire, on the night he threw our baby into the flames, on the night I begged him to believe me, and he chose to believe the woman who smiled at my funeral. Now that it was over, there was nothing left to mourn. Daniel Carter wasn't a loss, she was a warning. And Vanessa Collins? She'd already taken her last breath in a cold prison cell, probably still thinking she could cry her way out of the sentence. People asked if I felt guilty. My father even sat me down one night, his war-hardened voice unusually gentle, and said, "Chingyan, you know I would have supported whatever choice you made. But now that it's all behind you, do you feel like justice was enough?" And I looked him in the eye, this man who had led battalions and buried comrades and survived more betrayals than I could imagine, and said, "Justice doesn't feel like victory. It feels like survival." But that's all I ever needed. He didn't say anything else after that. Just patted my hand, kissed his grandson on the forehead, and left the room without another word. And I think that was the moment he truly understood that his daughter wasn't a girl anymore. She was a woman who had walked through fire twice and came back with her son still breathing. I focused on recovery. Physically, emotionally, financially. The military compound buzzed with gossip for months, and the higher-ups who once celebrated Daniel as a rising star suddenly remembered all the rules he broke. His name disappeared from the commendation board. His file was marked closed due to dishonorable conduct, and no one dared say my name in the same breath as his anymore. Rachel helped me transition out of the military family circuit. She connected me with civilian leadership groups, women-led defense tech firms, and even the governor's wife. I started speaking at conferences about systemic abuse, institutional betrayal, and how silence was never safety. It wasn't about revenge, Anna Marie, it was about making sure no other woman had to deliver a baby while begging not to be murdered. And people listened. Not because I was loud, but because I had lived it. I started receiving letters, dozens, then hundreds, from women in uniform, military wives, junior officers, even nurses, who had seen or experienced similar horrors but never had the protection or voice I was lucky enough to have. I didn't take that lightly. I answered every letter. I showed up. I kept going. But healing is messy, even when justice is served. Sometimes I'd still wake up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat, heart racing, thinking I was still on that operating table with DR. More pressing on my abdomen and trying to shove life back inside me. Sometimes I'd look at my son and flash back to the moment Daniel ripped him from my arms. And sometimes I'd wonder if in some other version of the world, Daniel didn't make that choice, and we raised this child together in peace. But that version didn't exist, and it never would. Because in this world, he chose Vanessa. And in this world, I chose to survive. One day, as I stood by the nursery window rocking my son to sleep, Rachel came in holding a small wooden box. She placed it on the dresser and said, "I got this out of evidence before they locked everything down. I thought you might want to see it." I looked inside. It was a notebook, Vanessa's. Pages full of sketches, notes, little diary entries. There were ones about Daniel, about her loneliness, about how she wished I'd just disappear. But near the back, there was one that stopped me cold. It read, "He said he would burn everything for me. He said she was just a phase. But then the baby came, and he changed. I hate him for choosing her again. I hate her more for being chosen. If I can't have him, neither can she." I stood there for a long time, just staring at that one paragraph. I thought I'd feel validated, triumphant even. But instead, I felt nothing. Just empty. Because it didn't matter anymore. She was dead. He was dead. And I was still here. I was alive. And that had to mean something. That night, I sat by the fireplace with Rachel while Mia played peekaboo with the baby on the floor. "You're different now," Rachel said, watching me over the rim of her wine glass. "Stronger. Sharper. But colder too." "Wouldn't you be?" I asked. She nodded. "Yeah, I would." There was no judgment in her voice. Just fact. And that was why I trusted her more than anyone. I looked down at the baby sleeping on my lap, his fingers curled around mine, and whispered, "He'll never know the fire. I'll make sure of that. He'll never grow up thinking love means suffering, or that silence means safety." Rachel smiled. "Then you've already won." I didn't respond. Just leaned my head back, eyes closed, heart finally beating at a normal rhythm. Until the doorbell rang. Mia jumped up, nervous as always, but Rachel waved her down and went to answer it herself. I listened to the muffled voices, the low murmuring, and then her footsteps returning. She walked in with an envelope in her hand and a strange look on her face. "It's from the Department of Defense," she said. "Marked urgent." I took it with steady hands, opened the seal, and read the first line. My breath caught. It wasn't about Daniel. It was about DR. Evelyn Ross, the good doctor I had begged for during labor, the one who never made it in time. She'd just been promoted to head of a new department investigating unethical medical conduct within military facilities. And she wanted to speak to me directly. My story had triggered something bigger. Something structural. They were launching a reform initiative and she wanted me to help shape it. I looked up at Rachel, my voice hoarse. "They're listening now." "Took them long enough," she muttered. But her eyes were proud. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't just surviving, I was leading. I wasn't just someone's wife, someone's daughter, someone's victim, I was someone with power. I was someone who knew what the darkness looked like and chose to drag others into the light. As I walked upstairs to put my son to sleep, I paused in the hallway mirror. The woman staring back at me looked tired but fierce, scarred but unbroken. And the ghost of the girl who once loved Daniel Carter with all her heart? She was long gone, buried with him, burned in the same fire he thought would destroy me. But I was still here, still breathing, still rising. Some people think rebirth is about revenge, about rewriting every wrong until you finally feel like you've won, but the truth is, it's never really about them. Not the ones who hurt you. Not the ones who left scars that still pulse beneath your skin in the dark. It's about you. About who you decide to become once you've been shattered and stitched yourself back together with the kind of thread that doesn't fray anymore. And I didn't truly understand that until months had passed since Daniel's death, since Vanessa's suicide, since the fire that never reached me this time but still left its mark. And I woke up one morning not thinking about either of them, just about whether my son had outgrown his newborn socks and if I had enough coffee left in the kitchen. It was that ordinary, that quiet, and that was the moment I knew I had healed deeper than I ever thought I could. I had stepped so far out of their shadows they couldn't touch me even in memory anymore, but just because I was finally free didn't mean I was done. When Dr. Evelyn Ross invited me to join the Department of Defense Reform Task Force, I accepted without hesitation. I walked into that sterile glass building with my head high, my story written into folders and policies and federal proposals, and I spoke for every woman who had ever been silenced, restrained, disbelieved. I walked into rooms filled with suits and medals and let them know I wasn't there to whisper. I was there to make sure no other Claire Bennett ever had to beg for her life in a place meant to deliver it. And while it didn't erase what happened to me, it gave it purpose, and that was something grief could never offer on its own. I became a face for change, not because I wanted the spotlight, but because someone had to hold it steady long enough for the next woman to walk into the light. And in doing that, I learned something else too. My son would never grow up with a father, but that didn't mean he'd grow up without love, because love had been reborn in our home in a quieter, stronger way, not in bouquets or parades or polished boots, but in morning lullabies and giggles during diaper changes, and the way Mia still guarded him like a tiny soldier sworn to a sacred mission. She called him Little Commander now, which made my father's eyes shine in that rare soft way that war-hardened men reserve only for blood that carries their name. And speaking of my father, he changed too after everything fell apart. He stopped pretending to be indestructible. He started inviting me into strategy meetings, into family trust decisions, into the kind of spaces where men used to pat me on the head and say, "You wouldn't understand." And now they ask for my perspective instead, because I didn't just survive, I exposed rot in the system and showed them what it looked like when women decided their silence was no longer a favor. I kept my last name Bennett, not because I needed to cling to my father's power, but because I had earned it in my own right. I wore it like armor and passed it proudly to my son. And when someone once asked if I'd ever consider remarrying, I laughed, not because I wouldn't, but because it had taken me too long to learn that I didn't need a man to make my life whole. I could choose love again someday, but it would never be out of loneliness, only out of freedom, only because I wanted to share my peace, not escape from my pain. And when I looked at my son each morning, I reminded myself that every step I took now, every law I helped change, every nurse I trained, every soldier I protected with the truth, it was for him, for the future he would grow up in, a future where his mother wasn't just a name in a tragic file, but a force that turned betrayal into blueprint, fire into foundation, and grief into grit. And the funny thing is, I still sometimes hear Daniel's voice in my sleep, not shouting or begging or accusing, but soft and confused, like he can't believe I'm gone from his world forever. And I always wake up smiling, because he was right about one thing. In the end, he wasn't the same woman he married. I wasn't the girl who cried herself hoarse asking him to come back. I was the woman who stood at his grave and didn't shed a single tear, because I had already buried the version of myself who needed his love to feel worthy. Now I had my own reflection, my own legacy, my own story, and if anyone ever asked me how I did it, how I survived a man who burned down our home, betrayed our vows, tried to silence my body and spirit, both, I'd say this: I stopped waiting for closure and started building my exit. I stopped begging and started documenting. I stopped saying, "I'm fine," and started saying, "You'll be hearing from my lawyer." And no, Healing didn't come with a magical sunrise or a symphony of apologies. It came in messy tears and long silences and quiet cups of coffee where I could finally breathe again. And now, years later, as I walk through the halls of the reform unit, badge around my neck and purpose in my stride, I sometimes pass photos of men who once called me too emotional to lead, and all I can think is look at me now, because I'm not just the woman who came back from the dead. I'm the woman who lit up every dark corridor they locked me inside and walked out holding my child, my truth and my power, and if that's not rebirth, I don't know what is.